key discoveries, innovative technologies, and problem-solving solutions can be developed in challenging time, the Prime Minister has underscored. He also implored all citizens to use this time to realize Ethiopia's future prosperity. Abiy vowed to end Ethiopia's recurrent challenges by using all possible options, adding much work will be done for the prosperity of Ethiopia at the grave of Ethiopian enemy. Deputy Prime Minister and Foreign Minister Demeqa Mekonnen met with the ambassadors of France, Germany, Hungary, Italy, the Netherlands, Portugal, Romania, Sweden, and Slovakia in Ethiopia for a briefing on the northern part of the country. Demeqa reiterated Ethiopia's effort to explain to the EU Commission and member states about the current situation in Ethiopia, albeit they showed reluctance to accept the facts on the ground. The refusal by the EU and the international community to openly acknowledge the unilateral humanitarian ceasefire extended by the government has also unnecessarily emboldened the TPLF clique, he said. He also expressed Ethiopia's disappointment over the silence of the EU in the face of massive belligerence, murder, and destruction of civilians in Afar and Amhara regions by the clique. He called on the recent EU resolution on Ethiopia unbalanced, adding that threatening to impose sanctions on the whole country based on investigations on human rights violations would be unjustified, since the aim should be to take measures against perpetrators of alleged violence. In charting the way forward, he said Ethiopia would conduct an all-inclusive national dialogue based on a roadmap that has been prepared by the government. He finally called on the EU and member states to extend their humanitarian air bridge support to the Amhara and Afar regions, besides supporting the sovereignty and integrity of Ethiopia, which is in the best interests of the European Union. The head of Sudan's ruling council, Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, has announced the dissolution of the Transitional Sovereign Council and the government. He announced the enactment of a state of emergency amid a military coup after the PM's arrest. Meanwhile, the UN Security Council is expected to discuss the issues in Sudan. Alola Teklamarem has more.
Tension has been rising for weeks between military and civilian factions sharing power in a fragile transitional government.
Sudan has suffered frequent coups since it gained its independence from Britain and Egypt. In 1956, al-Bashir came to power. In 1989, in one such takeover, which removed the country's last elected government. And similar public grievances brought Abdullah Hamdok and his team to the front line in Sudan's politics. Abdullah Hamdok was appointed as new Prime Minister of Sudan in August 2019, following the removal of Omar Hassan al-Bashir, who ruled the country for 30 years. His new leadership was set to run the country until an election is undertaken within 3 years. Ethiopia voiced solidarity with Sudan in its political transition held in 2019.
بمقدم رسول السلام رئيس وزراء أثيوبيا أبي أحمد وظلت ذات الابتسامة.
It is with great honor that I stand here before you, bearing witness to this momentous day which marks the birth of a new era for this great nation. We are gathered here in celebration of the people of Sudan who have sacrificed greatly to guarantee their freedom. Dearest brothers and sisters of Sudan, the people and government of Ethiopia celebrate with you today. Your victory is our victory, in the same way that your pain is our pain. The relationship between Ethiopia and the Sudan, surpassing many years, had been firmly rooted in mutual respect and solidarity.
Sudan has been on edge since a failed coup plot last month unleashed bitter recriminations between military and civilian groups meant to be sharing power following the toppling of the country's long-time leader Omar Hassan al-Bashir. Sudan's military wing announced that it has seized power Monday and dissolving the transitional government hours after troops arrested Prime Minister Abdullah Hamdok and other officials. Internet access was widely disrupted and the country's state news channel played patriotic traditional music. Thousands of Sudanese people took the streets of Khartoum in protesting the military coup that threatens the country's shaky progress towards democracy. Following the arrest of Prime Minister Abdullah Hamdok and other officials by troops, Burhan stated that the military will oversee the remainder of Sudan's transition to democracy and will hand over to democratically elected government.
In fact, we're going to that statement right now. Let's listen to it.
Who doesn't believe in peace and justice. That's why when the December revolutionaries said their slogans and thousands of them stood in front of the General Command of the Armed Forces responded positively and decided to work to achieve the aspiration of the people, to achieve the aspiration of the nation, justice, peace and freedom. Because we are quite convinced that the Sudanese people deserve a nation that they can practice and see these slogans and these big names in the nation until the moment we deliver power to a civilian government.
Since al-Bashir was forced from power, Sudan has worked to slowly rid itself the international pariah status it held under the autocrat. The country was removed from the United States state supporter of terror list in 2020, opening the door for badly needed foreign loans and investment. But the country's economy has struggled with the shock of a number of economic reforms called for the international lending institutions. It is to be recalled that Jeffrey Feltman, the U.S. Special Envoy to the Horn of Africa, met with Sudanese officials over the weekend in an effort to resolve the growing dispute between civilian and military leaders. The power seizure by the Sudan military remains to be a great concern for international institutions like the UN, Arab League, and the AU.
Now, the statement from the government of Ethiopia on the current situation in Sudan says the government of Ethiopia is closely following developments in Sudan. This particularly emanates from the strong brotherly ties that have existed between the peoples of the two countries for centuries. The statement recalled that the Ethiopian government has played a significant role in successfully mediating the establishment of a coalition government consisting of its civilian and military components, and to adopt the constitutional documents of the transitional period. The government of Ethiopia, therefore, calls on all parties for calm and de-escalation in the Sudan and to exert every effort toward a peaceful end to this crisis. In this regard, the government of Ethiopia fully supports the completion of Sudan's transition to democracy and the respect for the constitutional document of the transitional period. In another development, the African Union has called for the immediate resumption of consultations between the civilians and military within the framework of a political declaration and the constitutional decree. The statement it issued yesterday says the chairperson of the African Union Commission, Musa Faki Mahamat, has learned with deep dismay of the serious development of the current situation in Sudan, which has resulted, among other things, in the arrest of Prime Minister Abdullah Hamdok and other civilian officials. The chairperson reaffirms that dialogue and consensus is the only relevant path to save the country and its democratic transition. The chairperson further calls for the release of all arrested political leaders.
ከጨንቻ ወደ ጅማ የሚሄድ ወደ ሀገረ ማርያም የሚሄድ ወደ ሸዋ የሚሄድ ሸዋ ምንለው አዲስ አበባ ነው የሚሄድ ነጋዴ ሁሉ እዚህ መጥቶ ነው እረፍት የሚያደርገው።
Welcome back. You're still watching Addis News Hour. Some Western nations have opted to come to the extent of imposing sanctions on Ethiopia in the face of promising improvements in the East African nation. Professor Mamo Muche made the remark in an exclusive interview with ETV, and as such, they are adding flames to the conflict in Ethiopia instead of being part of the solution, he has said. The report is presented as follows. A rated research professor with the Department of Science and Innovation and the National Research Foundation, Mamo Muche is the South African Research Chair in Science, Technology and Innovation Studies at the Tshwane University of Technology in Pretoria, South Africa. In an exclusive interview with ETV, he asks as to why some Western nations opt to ignore the encouraging results in Ethiopia, which the burgeoning East African nation is registering.
There are two key issues that should be noted. There are forces in the West, from America, from the European Union, that are now saying sanctions must be imposed. All right, on Ethiopia. To this extent, they have come. I think the important point is what we should say now is that what we see in Ethiopia happening is that there is coronavirus, and it has affected the political process. Remember the election being postponed, and then that election being postponed, the Tigray People's Liberation Front said they will not postpone it, and then they did their own action. So what you have is a situation where there are difficulties like that, but at the same time, election has taken place.
Recalling the democratic election Ethiopia has recently achieved, he says the Western media and nations should have respected the will of the people of Ethiopia.
These external actors, what you call them white saviors, should not be imposing, on Ethiopia and threatening sanctions against Ethiopia. I think it doesn't go very well, because if the government that is elected by the people of Ethiopia. So we should, whatever we say at the moment, because of this, we should accept what's going on by the people, whether we like it or not, whether we like who is elected or not. The process, if the election process is done properly, then we should accept it.
The professor has also called on some elements and nations to stop and think before meddling in the sovereign internal affairs of Ethiopia. Residents of Dese and its environs are carrying out their daily activities without being distracted by the propaganda of the terrorist group. The elimination of the terrorist TPLF will now be a matter of time, it was indicated. Kasaun Chane has more.
National Movement of Amhara senior leadership members, including the Vice Chairman, paid a visit to the community in Dese and Irsemvrans, the Vice Chairman Yusuf Ibrahim said the invading and terrorist TPLF was spreading false information to terrorize Kombolcha, Dase and Irsemvrans. According to the Vice Chairman, the public should understand the TPLF's lies and work with the National Defense Forces, the Amhara Special Forces and other security forces to make Wollo the burial ground of the invading force. He said the terrorist group has deployed several guerrilla forces in various parts of Afar and Amhara regions, adding the clique was being beaten by the army, special forces, Fano and the farmers.
Now we are found at the town of Dese. The National Defense Force, alongside regional forces and the Fano and farmers, are truly advancing to the TPLF group. But this group is running away to their region. And the youths are working aggressively with the defense force being hand in glove. Hence, the youths gathered from various areas of the region are playing their share to defeat TPLF.
He also said Ethiopian children are beating together this invading force, noting the youths are striving hard to dismantle and put TPLF's grave in Wollo. Gashau Mersha, head of Structural Affairs Division at National Movement of Amhara, on his part underscored that they have witnessed the performance of the National Defense Force, Special Forces, Fano and farmers to dismantle the TPLF group during the visit.
We have seen that the defense forces and the special forces of the Amhara in other regions, Fano and the militia, have prepared together to struggle in the areas where the TPLF force has entered into. To be sure, I believe that the TPLF grave would be witnessed here in the shortest time possible. With the terrorist group's false rumors and chaos, the community should not leave their home and property.
By the time now, the community of Dase and Irsemvrans are carrying out their daily activities without being distracted by the propaganda of the terrorist group.
Now, in business, senior policy advisor to the Ethiopian Prime Minister says the country pushes forward to join the World Trade Organization. The advisor, Mamo Mheratu, said the country is racing against time to finalize preconditions for the accession of WTO. Demis Makrel has the following story.
Ethiopia has been trying to join the World Trade Organization since 2003. The country had renewed its dormant accession process 2 years ago at World Trade Organization Working Party meetings, and the result was acclaimed by Ethiopian side during the time.
እንደሚታወቀው ባለፈው አመት የዓለም ንግድ ድርጅት አባልነት እንቅስቃሴያችንን ወደፊት ለማስኬድ የድርድር እንቅስቃሴ አድርገናል።
We renewed our process to join WTO a year before. We will have further discussions in Geneva in the coming few months just to reinforce that. To finalize our move, we have to prepare and circulate a document that shows the service sectors opened up for external investors by Ethiopia's government. If we enter into negotiation after such efforts, the result will be undoubtedly promising.
In the last 2 years, the effort has been, however, hindered by several factors, including the coronavirus crisis, which halted talks on accession to the organization. Yet Ethiopia has finalized most works to join World Trade Organization, and economists say it will transcend the country from the local and regional economic zone to a more fitting international market.
የኢትዮጵያ አምራቾች የኢትዮጵያ ኤክስፖርተሮች ሌሎች የዓለም የንግድ ድርጅት አባል የሆኑ አገሮች
If Ethiopia joins WTO, local manufacturers and exporters will be guarded from unwarranted interventions in the international market. This provides an assured market opportunity to our business people.
Joining the World Trade Organization is not an easy task for countries like Ethiopia that has a history of high government economic monopoly. But the country is still pushing forward against all the backdrops just to join the organization.
A Nigerian delegation comprising business people and diplomats has explored tourism potential in Jimma zone. The delegation visited tourism destinations and investment sites in Jimma city and surroundings in the zonal administration. It is indicated that Nigerian business people included in the delegation have shown interest to invest in the area. Head of the delegation and founder of the African Children Talent, Noah Dalaji, said the visit of the delegation is aimed to enhance economic cooperation between Ethiopia and Nigeria in the investment sector. Now moving on, about 2 million Kenyans are facing starvation as a long-lasting drought affects the harvests and food production. The government has declared the situation a national disaster. Sintayo Tamrat has more on that from Al Jazeera.
In this part of Aija County, there is nothing left to eat for Abdurrahman Hussein Abdi's remaining cattle. Nearly every day he wakes up to this, his animals are wasting away and dying from hunger and disease. He says his prized bull, which on a good day cost around $700, does not have long to live either. Most of the animals here in northeastern Kenya are in poor condition. He's desperate.
We're struggling. Of 700 cattle for 3 families, there's only 300 left. They're malnourished. The ones that appear healthy just drop. I'm not sure what's affecting them.
Another village many kilometers away, Shabbat Isaac is just getting back home from a 4-hour trek to fetch water for his family and the sheep and goats he desperately needs to keep alive dead. And dying livestock scattered his compound for 7 months.
For 7 months we've been fetching water from very far away.
Malnutrition rates continue to rise. Children are receiving emergency food supplies from aid agencies.
Our children are affected. They get sick often. We hope to get more food for them. Many people are suffering from the drought.
The local government is distributing hay, nutritional livestock pellets, as well as transporting water to the most remote villages, but the need is too great. The drought in parts of Kenya has been declared a national disaster. Here in Wajir, pastoralists tell us it has not rained for the last 2 years, and the castors say the current short rains will not help much.
The food security currently is in the 3rd phase, what they call critical. And if we may not receive adequate rainfall in the coming few days, then definitely it's not something we can handle as a county. The resources we have is very limited.
Times are hard even for the most resilient of animals. Rare wildlife species found only in this part of the country are also succumbing to hunger, thirst and exhaustion. Back in the village, Abdurrahman Hussein tells us he is helpless as he watches his animals die every day.
Finally, the Somali National Army says its special forces, in cooperation with the regional Jubaland security forces, killed 3 Al-Shabaab fighters in an operation in the southern region. The SNA said the joint security operation against the Al-Qaeda allied terror group was carried out in several villages in the lower Juba region. 3 Al-Shabaab militants were killed during the operation, SNA radio reported, noting that the joint operation will be intensified in the region to flush out the militants who have been fighting to topple the internationally recognized Somali government. The latest operation comes amid sustained operations by the Somali Army and Jubaland state forces against Al-Shabaab militants who are still in control of the rural areas of that region, conducting ambushes and planting landmines. And with that, we come to the end of today's news. Many thanks for watching us. Bye-bye.